Hello, 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 friends, and welcome to the very first Garden Gab, where I go on and ramble about something important that you should know in the garden. The first Garden Gab that I've decided to ramble on about is the topic of worms. Today I was at my Toastmasters meeting, highly recommend, and I had a friend ask me, how do I cultivate worms in my garden? Where do they come from? Should I bring them into the garden? And here is my answer. They just come. If you give them food and you give them the right environment, worms just come to the garden. It's kind of like they show up out of nowhere. Whether you're growing in a raised bed, sometimes even a container, especially in the ground, if you can create an environment that suit worms, they just come out of the woodwork and you will find them in your soil, especially after the second or third year of continuing to enrich your soil. So, when I say create the environment for worms, what exactly am I talking about? Well, worms are munchers. They like to eat organic matter. That's what they like to feast on. So, number one, to encourage worms to come into your garden environment, you need to have organic matter in, on, next to, around, in betwixt, something in the soil. So, for them to be able to feed on. When I say organic matter, some of worms' favorite diets that I have uh, found to be is leaves that fall from the sky in the fall. Free worm food falling from the sky in the fall in many different growing regions, not in all growing regions, but any dead organic matter like dried leaves, um, dried, if you have like big ornamental types of grasses and you're chopping those things down, that's organic matter that you can lay on top of the soil and it will partially decompose and become worms munchies, munchy kibble for worms. Other things that worms absolutely love to munch on and that encourage a wormy environment is layering straw on top of your soil in your garden. Straw has many, many beneficial uses, and that's a topic for an entire different garden gab. But one of the benefits of using straw on your soil surface is that worms like to munch on straw. It's great fodder for encouraging a worm environment. Worm families will move into your soil if you're covering your soil with organic matter like leaves or straw. So those are the things that will encourage worms to come into your garden environment. What else can I say about worms? They can burrow an insane amount of depth down into the garden soil during the winter, and then they just kind of surface. If you have cold winters, it's incredible. Like they can burrow. I don't want to quote myself because I don't have it off the top of my head, and I should have things like this memorized and or researched before I do something like this, but again, it's a ramble. They burrow very deeply into the soil and then they reemerge in the spring. So you want to make sure that there's some kind of fodder for these worms in the spring if you live in an environment where there's that dormancy period in the winter and then reemergence in the spring. One of the best things that you can do is also amend your soil with compost. So this could be number one worm favorite food, mushroom compost. Worms love mushroom compost. Again, it's that dead organic matter type of stuff that they can chew on and munch on. And also things like mushroom compost. Mushroom compost also creates more of a loose soil environment so that worms can kind of move throughout the soil. If you have an extremely compacted soil, it might be hard for worms to kind of move through. So if you do have a fairly compact soil, or conversely, if you have a very sandy soil, you're going to want to add a fair amount of compost and organic matter into your soil over the years to correct that structure and make it more habitable and enticing for worms to come live, chew, eat, and poop, which is how we get worm castings. Worm castings are the excrement of worms. They are the byproduct of them munching on said organic material and excreting their castings or their poop essentially into the soil profile. The worm castings help with soil structure. As well as delivering a beautiful, well-balanced dose of micronutrients that can then be cycled and taken up by plants to make healthy plants. So to close up this garden gab about worms, to encourage the wormy environment, you want to make sure that you have organic matter going into your garden every year, whether that's mushroom compost, another variety of compost. You want to make sure that you're covering your compost with organic material such as decomposing leaves or straw. Worms love that decomposing matter to chew on. That's how they create those worm castings. And the other thing I want to slide right in here about worms is worms do like somewhat of a moist environment. That's where that straw or leaves on top of the soil really comes in handy as well. Worms are not going to be very drawn to a dry, cracked, sun, beaten topsoil layer. They need to have some coverage to be able to emerge to the top of the soil profile and nibble on whatever is within those top few inches of the soil profile. So making sure that you're covering the top of your soil with leaves or straw encourages that worm habitat. It also helps keep moisture in as well. It protects from those harsh sun rays, which is much more preferable for worms to inhabit that area versus an area that has no covering on the top of the soil and it's just baking in the hot sun. And then lastly, don't forget, worms don't do super well in extremely compacted environments or extremely sandy environments. So trying to create that balance over the years of adding different types of composts and organic materials to your soil will create a wormy environment. Woo! That was a lot of rambling. I hope you enjoyed this first garden gab where I ramble on and on about something important that you should know about in the garden. And I hope you have a great day. Follow me, subscribe, like, do all of those fun things that I don't know really what to say about that yet. But if you like this and you want to hear more, I hope you'll join me for the next garden gab. Peace. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check me out elsewhere, like on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Thank you very much. Happy gardening.